once again, the Supreme Court is doing something that most Americans don't want them to do, and that is overturn a legitimate ruling or law by either Congress or executive order by the president using the powers of that the Congress has given him. And that is exactly what they're attempting to do, have an autocracy in the Supreme Court that says, no, we will give the middle class and the poor nothing. While we don't have a problem giving it to the wealthy, while we don't have a problem giving quantitative easing to the corporatocracy, we are going to, however, penalize all those students who took out loans because they were told that an education would get them forward, and then find out later that they're nothing more than pawns to the corporate state. In other words, they pay for their education, then the corporations use them. The corporations don't want to pay taxes to educate them through the school system. They make them put all the burden on the individual. And then when they are overtaken by debt, you're on your own. We'll just bleed you as others make it. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Supreme Court justices heard arguments in 2 cases challenging President Biden's plan to forgive student loan debt. The White House is trying to use the HEROES Act to relieve more than $400 billion in loans for tens of millions of borrowers after the pandemic. NBC News reports the law in question says the government can provide relief to recipients of student loans when there is a national emergency, allowing it to act to ensure people are not in a worse position financially as a result of the emergency. Challengers say that law is not specific enough to warrant the forgiveness. The court's 3 liberal justices appeared to disagree.
Congress could not have made this much more clear. I mean, Congress didn't say exactly the circumstances in which it wanted the secretary to use this authority. Of course not. This is a bill about, like, what happens when you have an emergency. So what Congress said is what happens when you have an emergency is the secretary has the power to take care of emergencies. And it has that power by way of waiving or modifying any provision and adding others in lieu of them.
But the court's conservative majority seemed to agree with the plaintiffs, with some justices questioning the fairness of relieving student debt.
What I think they argue that is missing is cost to other persons in terms of fairness, for example, people who've paid their loans, people who don't have planned their lives around not seeking loans, and people who are not eligible for loans in the first place, and that $500 billion is being diverted to one group of favored persons over others.
Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley. Lawrence, read the tea leaves for us. How do you think the court will likely rule on these cases?
Well, I think going into this oral argument, with this conservative majority that we have that has in multiple other cases has ruled against the Biden administration on these big kind of sweeping policies that the conservatives think don't have proper congressional authorization. It kind of seemed like this was going to go the same way even before the argument started, and that's exactly what happened. It's following that script of the conservative justice, very skeptical of broad use of federal power by the president, especially during the pandemic, and kind of pushing back on the idea that the president has the authority to do this without some explicit authorization from Congress, not just a line in the law or something that sort of is kind of vague, but something much more specific, especially when this is something they see as a kind of benefits program akin to some of the other big benefits programs the federal government has, which the conservative justices would say have all been authorized by Congress.
I'm curious what you make of the argument that it's not fair, that some people have paid their debt. Some people worked really hard not to have the debt. It strikes a chord, but will it hold up?
Well, it's interesting because the fairness argument, you wouldn't normally think of that as a legal argument as such, even though a couple of the justices brought it up. But what they seem to be saying was that this kind of feeds into this idea that, when Congress is the body that should decide whether to issue a new benefit that, maybe favors one group over another group, as Justice Gorsuch said. So they're sort of saying, like, it's not up to President Biden to decide, to favor one big group of people, 40 million people, and cost, $400 billion. But it's up to Congress to make that decision. And that's in line with sort of what they've ruled in these other cases on things like that recently.
Again, President Biden has the authority given to him by Congress. And as Kagan said, Supreme Court Justice Kagan said, it is one of the more explicit authorities he has. Ideologically, these guys hate giving money to those who are below a certain level of wealthiness, richness. But if it were anything that the government takes the coffers, the monies from the average American citizen, the poor, the middle class, to pass it on top, like they did throughout history, not a problem. Folks, the student loan issue is one that needs to be left alone. The president made a very modest offer. We think the debt should be eliminated altogether, whether debt given by the government or by private institutions. We think that should be taken off the table completely, and higher education, which moves the country forward, should be merit-based and have nothing to do with folks having to get money. Just like high school was given after we realized that we needed high school to move the country forward, we also should be doing that with public college education. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.